येषां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोतं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि।
Namaste and welcome to KYG or Kaivalya Yoga Gurukulam. For this class in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. In this episode we shall study Sutra number 9. Behind me is a very ancient temple that is related to a story that happened, historically recorded 5,000 years ago, the story from the Mahabharata. We shall cover that in detail when we visit the temple in a separate video. But I chose this much quieter spot, a little away from the temple, but it spoke to me, it called me, so here I am. In this sutra, Patanjali addresses the third type of the vrittis. If you remember, in Sutra 6, he spoke about 5 different types of vrittis: pramana, viparyaya, vikalpa, nidra and smriti. So we covered 2 of them, pramana, which is direct perception. And then we covered viparyaya, which is misperception, misguided perception. Now, the thing that is common to both of these are that the object of perception is present. One, you are able to perceive it as it is. The other one, you perceive it in a different way because of reasons that we explained in the last episode. So we had perception and misguided perception. Both of these has an object or a circumstance in front that the senses can visualize or experience in some form or the other. The eyes could see it, or the ears can listen to the sound, and so on. The third vritti is perhaps very common to all of us, but nevertheless it's an interesting vritti, and that is vikalpa. Vikalpa. Vikalpa is imagination, conceptualization, where only a concept exists, a hypothesis exists. The sutra goes like this: śabda-jñāna-anupātī vastu-śūnyo vikalpaḥ. He is telling us what is vikalpa. śabda-jñāna-anupātī vastu-śūnyo vikalpaḥ. All right, what does it mean? Śabda-jñāna. Shabda. There is word though. There is word that is going to convey to us an idea that exists in imagination. So there is word. Śabda-jñāna. The knowledge that comes from words alone. Anupātī. That means this knowledge that is following or coming as a result of words is devoid of any objects. Vastu-śūnyo. Vastu-śūnyo means devoid of any object. Any object in the sense, it could also mean an actual physical object, but it also means, it refers to any sensual experience, like where the senses can see or taste or touch or smell, right? So, vastu-śūnyo. Śûnyah. Śûnyah means nil, doesn't exist. What exists? The knowledge from words alone, devoid of any object. That is imagination. You listen to something and then you begin to imagine. Now when we say no sensual experience, the words that we listen to is perhaps a sound or so. So perhaps that is one exception to this imagination. There is some sensual input, of course, by way of words. You could read it or you could hear it in that sense. There is a sensory input. But the object is not there for us. and therefore that opens the doors to imagination. There are many ways we can address this topic. It's very relatively simple, but I'll just open a couple of ideas for you to ponder. The power of storytelling. We have heard of fairy tales in the recent past. We hear of Puranas from the ancient past, if you will. Puranas are stories that you cannot relate to in sensual terms, through senses. You can't see those kind of things. You have no recollection of any of the senses having seen or heard any such thing. For example, the story of Ganesha, the son of Shiva. He had a human head, then Shiva replaced it with an elephant head. Gods who have 4 hands. Shiva has a lock of hair in which the river Ganges is there. He has a third eye, which is of the third eye of fire. Right? All these are imaginations to us. You and I can listen to these words or read about it. In other words, words bring us the knowledge of what Shiva looks like. And you're closing your eyes, and now what is happening is vikalpah takes place. We are imagining what Shiva would look like, what his son Ganesha would look like, or what his son with the 6 heads, Kartikeya, will look at, right? We are going to listen to all those, and all of that is imagination. So these are other kinds of vrittis that are constantly forming the impressions on the chitta. The reason why we need to analyze this, go back to the drawing board, if you will, is because we think of vrittis as mere thoughts. And so how do I control my thoughts? How do I control my emotions? It's not just that, right? It has to be understood that what is the quality of my thinking in general? Do I spend too much time in imagination? And what is the quality of my imaginations? Are these imaginations binding me, bringing me back to the elements of fear, anxiety? Or are these imaginations liberating in nature? Are they helping me break from my conditioned thinking? The story of Hanuman taking a leap across the ocean, or Superman flying across the sky, all of that liberates my thinking of, oh, this is not possible, I cannot do this, I cannot do that. I hear these stories, the chitta begins to absorb that. In other words, like we discussed earlier, chitta has no form, mind has no form. So when I think of Hanuman taking the leap, Hanuman strong and bold and confident, and he became huge, then suddenly the chitta becomes that. And all of those qualities are absorbed by the chitta, and it helps me break free from my little self, from my idea of conditioned, oh, Sundar cannot do this, Sundar cannot do that. Suddenly Sundar has become Hanuman at that moment. The chitta has now become Hanuman, and as Hanuman, Sundar can do. There was a movie called The Avatar in the recent past, where it is the same thing. The actor there, the hero, is on a wheelchair. Sitting on the wheelchair, he cannot do that. But then he has an avatar that does amazing things, goes to this wonderland, and he does things that he cannot dream of doing. And then slowly he becomes that avatar. He becomes part of that dimension, if you will. So imagination has power in it, which is why Puranas are very powerful. We need to respect that. It really doesn't matter. When I'm talking of Puranas here, Puranas are those ancient stories of Shiva and Shakti and Parvati and gods and goddesses. It doesn't matter. We debate on whether it actually happened or didn't happen and which yuga it happened and so on. It really doesn't matter. The idea of those Puranas, the aim, the way I've understood it, the way I have made peace with it, and the way it makes sense to me is those ideas were given for you to imagine, and through imagination you could free the chitta and open that. Open your mind. And the mind starts opening up. It stops getting trapped in its same old conditioned patterns of thinking. 2 + 2 must be 4. 4 plus 4 must be 8. That is true to some extent. But then the mind is capable of anything beyond physics, beyond time, beyond space. Vyasa in his commentary talks about this statement. He says, the form of consciousness is the Purusha. So when we think of that as if consciousness has a form, he says you are thinking of two things, consciousness and the seer, or consciousness and Purusha, but actually they are not different, they are the same. But in order to help you comprehend it, the mind breaks and starts imagining what is consciousness, how can Purusha be that form, and so on and so forth. So it's very abstract, but then the mind begins to break through and start thinking about that. That is the power of imagination. And so imagination can be binding, imagination can be liberating. As we studied in the 6th Sutra, vrittaya panchataya, there are 5 types of vrittis, klishta, aklishta. We have to always remember, none of these vrittis are bad. We say, oh, vrittis are bad, thoughts are bad, emotions are bad. No, they're not bad or good, but they're not even disturbing. They could be, from one perspective, from another perspective, from another angle, they could be the ones that will liberate the chitta and bring us to that state of one-pointedness. So we need to understand at this point merely the categories of chitta, the vrittis on the chitta, and how these types of vrittis, these categories of vrittis can either bind me or can be benign, harmless, and actually help me, liberate me from my conditioned thinking. And once I break free from my conditioned patterns of thinking, there is a possibility I might enter this dimension where I can take one vritti, the I in me, and settle with that. That's when yoga begins, right? That's what we learned in the first couple of verses of the Yoga Sutra. And therefore, the 9th Sutra introduces us to this idea of imagination as a vritti on the chitta. śabda-jñāna-anupātī, vastu-śūnyo vikalpaḥ. Please meditate on these thoughts, analyze them, and start analyzing your own thinking, the vrittis on your own chitta. And then we become more and more in tune, more and more mindful of what is going on in here. And then when we approach the idea of yoga and meditation, we understand that yoga and meditation is more of a lifestyle, a greater philosophy than mere techniques, how to sit down and what kind of breathing and what kind of chanting. All that falls in place later. But understand that what are vrittis, what are these impressions that are constantly being bombarded on my chitta, and when and how can I attain that ekagrata, one-pointedness, and from where I will enter into the realms of samadhi, if you will. As always, thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my perspectives on this ancient and most fascinating study of the human consciousness through the chitta. On this holy grounds of this ancient temple, I feel as privileged as I sit in front of every temple. Until we meet again, stay blessed, stay inspired. Namaste.
Kaivalya